Mr. Dirks?
Here.
Ms. Fergus?
Here.
Ms. Fitzgibbon?
Here.
Mr. Fry?
Here.
Ms. Grassi?
Here.
Mr. Mazur is excused. Mr. Schumacher?
Here.
Ms. Sorg?
Here.
Ms. Tarpinian?
Here. At this time, if there's anyone from the public that would like to comment, please step forward stating your name and address. It is our policy to allow up to 3 minutes per person, so please keep your comments brief. Seeing none, I will turn it over to Dr. Onsager for the district administrator's report.
Thanks, Donna. Couple quick items. First of all, I'd like to thank Mr. Charpentier and the staff of Kaganza. The board earlier took a tour of Kaganza, and it's always great to have the chance to show all of you and anybody who's interested what's going on in the schools. So a lot of great things that are happening in the schools and a lot of exciting things. Next thing I had is we are continuing our process of doing interviews for the next Sandhill principal. We did second rounds today. I will be doing some sort of site visit probably in the near future for people as we continue to narrow it down. And then the last thing that I am trying to coordinate, there is, I have an interest to see what's it like on a typical day of a high school student. So I will be shadowing a high school student within the next month or so, spending my day shadowing them, seeing what they go through. And
You don't get enough of them at home?
no, it's not going to be my son, and I'd ask him if he was okay if I shadowed somebody else.
It
But
won't be noticed.
and I figured I could fit right in. I'll wear jeans and a sweatshirt and fit right in. Nobody will notice that I'm there, but just kind of seeing what it's like in the day in life of a high school student.
Just get a hoodie, put some earbuds.
Yeah,
on,
so if you have your first expulsion case in years, you know that it didn't go well for me. And the Cruz is taking me for expulsion, so.
Great.
Where would
Anything
they
else?
send you though? If they, pass cruise, then where would they?
I don't know,
Always straight up to the board.
Probably,
Well, thanks, Tim. Bev, would you be willing to present the consent agenda?
I would. Thank you very much. I move approval of the March 28th, 2016 regular meeting minutes. I move approval of the March 19th to 30th, 2016 check register as presented. We would like to say a sincere thank you to the following individuals and groups and move approval of their donations to the district. $115 for Kaganza student field trip expenses from Kaganza Working for Kids Parent Group. $9,526 for high school girls hockey expenses from Power Play Hockey Club. $160 for Fox Prairie field trip expenses from Aldo Leopold Nature Center. $150 for high school choir tour expenses from Madison Westtown Middleton Rotary Club. $3,750 for high school athletic uniforms from Stoughton Sports Boosters. $1,000 for high school state tournament expenses from Stoughton Girls Youth Basketball and related budget adjustments for $14,701. I also move approval of a Fox Prairie Garden Grant in the amount of $2,000. And we would like to thank Mary Buchholz for all her wonderful years of service and reluctantly move approval of the retirement of Mary Buchholz at the end of the 2015-16 school year.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I have a comment to make regarding Ms. Buchholz's letter of resignation. I think it's telling that there still are problems with the compensation plan. Evidently a great teacher has decided to leave us.
Duly noted. Thank you, Wanda. Any other questions or comments? Seeing no more discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay? Any abstentions?
Me, I wasn't here.
I
Who's
did
a
not
nay?
say nay.
Scott
I
said nay.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm abstaining.
Great, thank you. That motion carries. At this time, we have no committee reports, but we do have 2 discussion items on the agenda related to middle school athletics and fees. And I'm wondering if Brett, and who's the finance committee chair, and Erica Pickett, if you would please open the discussion.
Sure, so, during the last finance committee meeting, we talked about fees as we do around this time every year. We do a review of, there's quite a bunch of fees that we do take a look at. Lunches and athletic fees and pool fees, all that sort of thing. And the one bigger change, I guess, would be the shifting of middle school athletic funds that go into Fund 80 because of differences in rules. Erica, do you want to talk about the differences in rules on that one?
I could just touch on it a little bit. About a year or so ago, we were talking about some changes to Fund 80 that were actually retroactive back to the start of the 14-15 school year, and it was due to some changes in the law that came about through the state budgeting process. And it wasn't until the end of last year that DPI was able to write the rules around how we would interpret some of those changes. And we had to move a number of expenses out of Fund 80 into our general fund. Fund 80 is our community services fund that we had typically handled some of our pool expenses, or the majority of our pool expenses, and some of our auditorium expenses. Those were the main things in there for the community use portion of those facilities. And due to some of those changes, we had to actually move a lot of the pool expenses back into the general fund. We talked about that quite a bit last year. So we ended up moving over $100,000 of expenses back into our general operating fund. So one of the things that many districts have looked at, are there other things that could be shifted from their general fund into Fund 80 that legitimately can do that, given the stipulations and the restrictions that have been put on that fund. And one of the things that DPI supports and some other districts have talked about is moving your middle school athletic program into your community services fund. And I know Wanakee did this for the current school year. I know Sun Prairie was looking at it too, but they haven't made that change yet. But we would have to make a few small changes to how we offer middle school athletics. It would have to be open to all kids in the community, even those that don't attend River Bluff as their primary school. So it would be available to students that are homeschooled by their families, and also kids that are attending a private school. So that would primarily be St. Anne's for the most part here in the community. It would essentially move about $60,000 out of our operational budget for next year into the community services fund. And just to be very honest, the community services fund is a separate tax levy that falls outside of the revenue limit. But again, the movement of those dollars into Fund 80 is still less than what we previously had taxed for in our community services fund. So again, it's a small amount, but we're trying to be looking at every little thing we can do to, free up resources in our operational fund to help with those, future cuts that are looming out there. So again, a small piece, but one of the things that we wanted to propose. And again, in terms of changes, it's pretty minimal. I met with our high school athletic director and our middle school administration, so we could just kind of look at what that would mean and how we would have to accommodate those things. But it's really more of an effort on our end, more so than anything that's going to impact the kids. So we felt like it was a good change to bring forward. And like Brett said, the finance committee talked about it, and it was something that was supported by that entire group.
I think we do have to modify one policy that we just did revise, and that was regarding the participation rules, because it only referred to high school, right?
Yeah, and I know that I should look at that policy again, because I know we weren't concerned that the rules were the same as the high school, because the high school is governed by the WIAA, the middle school is not. So I didn't have a chance to look at that, but if you feel that we need to
Well, I think it was
check
one
that
because
policy.
it addressed the people that were outside of, not coming here directly to
Yeah.
school, but I thought that was enveloped under that policy.
I will check in with Fred Trotter too, because I thought we talked about this. Because I know with the WIAA, there's a change that we have to allow homeschool students, but not private schools. So there's a little bit of a difference.
Oh, I
But
see.
But I'll just double check the policy and see if we need to do anything to make a change to that.
Does anyone else have any other questions?
At least for the fund baby part.
Okay, might as well
So,
stay up there,
yeah. Yep.
Erica. So then the increase.
A lot of the remainder of the fees, like, you know, the one that we have to look at every year, just that we're required to, are the lunch fees and food fees. USDA requires us to do that, and then a lot of the other fees, we didn't change all that much, other than how we're handling the lacrosse athletic fee, right?
Yep, I'll just talk real quickly about both lunch and breakfast fees. In the handout, you can see the proposed increases for next year. We do have a tool that we're required to use to look at what that minimum fee increase has to be, based on the federal guidelines that really dictate what we do with the lunch program. Breakfast is not necessarily governed by those same requirements for fee increases. So we have not done a whole lot with our breakfast. When we look at surrounding communities and what they're charging for breakfast, we're kind of right in line. And actually, we lose a little bit of money on breakfast. Again, we make up for it in lunch participation, so it's not too much of a concern. But we did suggest a small increase of 5 cents for breakfast, just to help keep up with some of those escalating food costs. And then there's a larger increase for adults, because when we looked at it, we realized that we were charging at the adult price the same as the student price. And there aren't many adult breakfasts that are purchased by staff, but we felt that when we're already kind of taking a loss on each meal sold, we felt it was reasonable to increase the price for adults. So again, the lunch increases are based on that tool that were provided by the USDA, and then the breakfast, the student one is to keep up with just escalating food costs, and then the adult one is just to bring it more in line with what's common.
Any questions?
Should I keep going on other fees?
Sure.
There was one, every year we also look at our facility rental fee, and again, the statute allows us to charge a cost that basically, charge a fee that recovers our costs, so we have a formula that we've used. There is one, I think it's the high school cafetorium, that will have a small proposed increase for next year. The reason why it's not here tonight is because that, the whole facility use fee is in the process of being reviewed. So I forwarded that information to Mr. Trotter, so he can then pull that into the other revisions for the whole policy, and then that can just come to the board in one whole, you know, just all together, the attachment and the policy revisions. So he'll have that at the next policy committee meeting. The pool program fees, there's no recommended increase for that either. We take a look at that every year just to see how we line up with other districts, and the finance committee felt that what we're charging right now is pretty comparable with other area pools, and we didn't want to increase that with the risk of, you know, potentially minimizing participation in those programs. The annual fees that we charge at registration for consumables, supplies, and materials, again, we haven't increased those in a few years, but just given some of the changes that we're seeing in our student population, we just didn't feel that we needed to do that. And we recognize too that those kinds of increases aren't necessarily a way to address a very huge, you know, budget deficit in the future. And with declining enrollment, you know, even when you increase the fee, it doesn't necessarily generate any additional revenue. So we just didn't feel at this time that was something we wanted to pursue. I'll just keep going if you want me to stop.
Yeah,
Athletic
please.
fees, this one is a little bit different. Right now, we have a tiered structure where for the first sport, athletes pay $50, and then for the second and third sport, they pay $25. We looked at other districts, and it's not, you know, it's done differently all over the place. But one of the things that actually prompted us to start looking at this was, as with everything, we're trying to find ways to improve efficiencies and, you know, streamline some processes. And we were looking, we moved into the area of online payments for registration last year, and we offered families the opportunity to pay a number of fees online prior to getting to registration. When we looked at setting this up, we ran into some challenges because all fall sports are going to be a first sport. But by the time you get to track in the spring, it could be your first sport, it could be your second sport, or it could be your third sport. So there's really a potential for a parent to choose track as 3 different options. And once you start looking at setting everything up like that, it got really complicated. And then as we started just problem solving around that, we talked to the high school athletic department. They said, well, we really have to track all that information anyway, because depending on what a student has done, you know, throughout the course of the year, really, you know, will change what that fee structure is for that person. So there's a lot of time and energy going into tracking that, and it's a little bit of a barrier in creating an easy online payment option for parents. So what we're proposing is that instead of having that first sport, second sport, third sport structure, we move to a flat fee of $40 per sport. When we look at it from a macro level, from a budget perspective, when we looked at the total number of kids that participated and how many sports they were in, a flat fee of $40 would be basically budget neutral. When you look at it for each, you know, different scenario, for a student that's only participating in one sport, they're actually going to pay a little bit less than they're currently paying. For the kids that are doing 2 sports, it'll be $5 more for the whole year, and for the kids that are doing 3 sports, it's an increase of $20. But by moving to this, we're going to streamline some processes in the athletic department. We'll be able to offer the option for parents to pay online, which I think people will really will like. And again, it was a budget neutral suggestion. So we talked quite a bit at the finance committee about that. We talked a little bit about resources available to families that have financial need. We waive fees for families that approach us and request that. For families that are on our free and reduced meal program, every year when the approval letters go out, we also include in that some information on how they can just opt right up front to have those athletic fees waived as well. So we have a number of things in place. We have 2 district social workers that work with families, and you know, will connect in with us as needed if there's some assistance that's required. So we would not propose this with the thought that there would be a barrier for kids to participate based on cost. And then I guess the last one is lacrosse. So a few years ago, we added lacrosse as an option for our athletic program. We did that with the thought that it would be cost neutral to the district, and what we've relied on for the first few years is the lacrosse booster group donating the money to the district to basically offset our cost. You may recall a couple years ago, we did something very similar for hockey, where because of the large cost with hockey, we relied a lot on some donations from booster groups to help support those costs. Lacrosse is not a WIAA sport, but hockey is, and the WIAA had some concerns that districts were relying on those donations because they found, not necessarily here, but in some places, those external organizations would require parents to pay, and if they didn't pay, then the student wasn't able to play, because they may not have the same kind of supports and systems in place to, you know, cross over those barriers. So we just thought it would make sense to put a similar system in place for lacrosse like we're doing for hockey. Instead of having an external group potentially charging parents and then turning around and giving us the money, we would just determine what an appropriate fee would be to cover costs for that particular sport, and then we would charge the families directly. That way, if there is a financial burden, we can just handle that internally like we would with anything else. So again, the $150 is what families are currently paying. It's just that they're not paying it to us, they're paying it to, Tim, is it the lacrosse, whatever the lacrosse group is in town, so. So that is it for fee recommendations.
Any questions from any board member?
A pool wage increase too.
I can hit that one next if we're ready.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Every year, this is another one of those things that we look at on an annual basis. We take a look at what we're currently paying our pool employees for the different tasks that they're doing, and we try to do our best to compare that to other area pools. And when we looked at where we were this year, moving into this summer, we felt that we had dropped slightly below average and are recommending that we increase employee pool wages by 25 cents an hour for the 16-17 school year. The last time we did increase pool wages was back in 2013-14, And with the proposed increase for next year, it would be a cost of about $2,400. The majority of that would be in Fund 10. There would be a small portion of it that would fall into Fund 80.
Okay. I do have one question.
Sure.
You mentioned several times that we have resources available for families
Yep.
that are unable to accommodate those fees.
Yep.
What about swim lessons? Do we do anything regarding swimming lessons? I'm only asking because my son he lifeguarded at the swimming hole last year and said it would really be a good thing if there were some kids who were able to take those lessons.
Some lessons. You know, I would have to probably connect in with our social workers to see. I just don't get involved specifically with that. I would have to check with our social workers to see if they've helped any families that have wanted something like that. Pete, do you know off the top of your head?
They do, using the Angel Fund, there's several funds available that fund any sorts of those sort of expenses. And we have a really good pulse on that, through our social workers and building principals.
I just don't know off the top of my head if that's been used at all for swim lessons.
Yeah, I noticed too in our last meeting, Todd Hipke talked about, that was one of the projects one of the students was looking into, and I mean, it really seems like there's a need there, and maybe if they don't realize that those are available, that, you know, we send out the free and reduced lunch
Yeah.
thing, but maybe we could put something out as well about swimming lessons, just because it is a skill that I think everybody needs to have. Allison?
I'm just making a note so I can talk to.
Sure.
Yeah.
That was kind of leading into my question, how do we let families know about Angel Fund or other funds that are available? Is it through social work then, or?
I would say that the social workers have access to a lot and they do tend to work with many of our families. I know the principals are really good about connecting in with either the social workers or Pete or with my office if they just have reason to believe that a family might need some assistance. Again, my office tends to get involved when it's, you know, around meals or whatever,
Right.
but I would say the principals have a pretty good pulse on, you know, their families that might need some support. And I know Cheryl is here. Do you have a process, or Don, you're here too. Do you have some thoughts about that?
Yeah, at the elementary level, one of the things that we do for even like field trips is at the end of every field trip, we will always include if you're willing to donate more for, you know, for those families. We also meet about twice a month with our social workers, our school psychologists and counselors, and the building principals to discuss families, attendance families in need. So we're constantly giving out names of and we get that information a lot from our, classroom teachers.
Okay.
But,
I know there's some local churches that'll even connect in with some of our schools too, if they've got,
Okay.
you know, support opportunities.
Just, you know, it just helps us figure out how to get the word out that if we, you know, make a change to that, just so we've got a system in place. Because, I mean, I understand about the field trips, which is great, but people might not necessarily think of asking about swim lessons.
We also do that with all of our materials and supplies, or supplies list. We put that at the bottom, and we also put that into our newsletters.
Right, okay.
In fact, I think it's become pretty well known. I mean, people will call us before we start school and say, do you have
Okay.
school supplies? And, we start a list already in July.
One of the things, when we discontinued the swimming portion, in the gym classes, there's just a lot of kids that, lost out on that opportunity, I think. So it would be good if we were aware of some way to make that known, along with all the other
Yep.
things.
Okay. I did make a note to follow up on that.
So, if there's no other questions, both these items will be at our next regular board meeting under discussion action. So if you do have any other questions, I would say direct them to Tim so that he can find an answer, and we'll be ready for a discussion next time.
Thanks.
Thank you. At our last meeting, we discussed the 2016-17 critical staffing recommendations from Dr. Onsager, and it is now on the agenda for discussion action. So in order to proceed, I would entertain a motion to approve that recommendation.
I'll make a motion to approve the staffing recommendations for 2016-17 school year.
Is there a second?
Second?
All those in favor say aye. Do we not need to do it?
Can I
You
have
just need the
one?
You
motion.
want some discussion?
Discussion.
Oh, this is just for the discussion. I
Yeah.
thought we had to vote for the motion, so we don't have to vote for the motion. Great. So now that we have a motion on the table, we can discuss the fees. Does anyone have any discussion or questions?
And I'm sorry, and this is related to staffing or
Staffing.
fees?
Sorry,
Okay.
sorry.
Okay. I know when we talked about this last week, there was one position we weren't sure how that was going to fall as far as layoff, or do we know?
No, I don't know anything.
We don't know anything
No,
more?
I'm still,
Okay.
still anticipating a retirement, but do not have anything official yet, so.
Okay.
Any other questions or concerns? Seeing no more discussion on the motion, then I believe we are ready to vote. And I believe that we can just do this by voice. So, all those in favor of the motion to approve the recommendation for the 2016-17 critical staffing, say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you. We do have several policies on the agenda for approval. Again, in order to discuss, I would entertain a motion for the first policy on the agenda, special education, to, in whatever way you want to make that motion.
I make a motion to replace policy 1300, special education, with a new policy 703, equal opportunity for education.
Is there a second?
A second.
The motion has been seconded to replace the policy 1300 with the new policy 703. Is there any discussion?
When I was reading through it, kind of trying to, there's not like a real replacement or something, or is everything is being replaced? This is something that I don't understand.
Well, the existing policy 1300 will be removed from the policy
Okay.
manual and will be replaced with a policy 703. It has some portions of the existing
But
1300
it will be totally,
Mhm.
included like
in our policy manual. Any other questions? I believe this has to be done by roll call vote.
Mr. Dirks?
Yes.
Ms. Tarpinian?
Yes?
Mr. Schumacher?
Yes.
Ms. Fergus?
Yes.
Ms. Sword?
Yes.
Ms. Fitzgibbon?
Yes.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Ms. Grassi?
Yes.
And that motion carries. I would entertain a motion for policy 802 revisions, assigning grade placement.
I move to approve policy 802, assigning grade placement as presented.
Do I have a second?
Second.
That motion to approve these revisions has been made. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion on the motion, I believe we're ready to vote. And again, Bev, we have to do this by roll.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Ms. Grassi?
Yes.
Ms. Fergus?
Yes.
Ms. Sword?
Yes.
Ms. Fitzgibbon?
Yes.
Ms. Tarpinian?
Yes.
Mr. Dirks?
Yes.
Mr. Schumacher?
Yes.
And that motion carries. Do I have a motion to approve new policy 721, youth options?
I make a motion to present 721 youth options for approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
The motion has been made to approve policy 721. Is there any discussion? Seeing no more discussion on the motion, then I believe we're ready to vote. And again, roll call, please.
Mr. Schumacher?
Yes.
Ms. Fergus?
Yes.
Ms. Sword?
Yes.
Mr. Dirks?
Yes.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Ms. Grassi?
Yes.
Ms. Fitzgibbon?
Yes.
Mrs. Tarpinian?
Yes. 3 down. 2 to go. Do I have a motion to approve new policy 720, talented and gifted students?
Yes, I move to approve policy 720, talented and gifted students as presented.
And is there a second?
Second.
The motion has been made. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing no more discussion, I will ask Bev again to ask by roll call vote.
Ms. Grassi?
Yes.
Mr. Schumacher?
Yes.
Mr. Dirks?
Yes.
Ms. Tarpinian?
Yes.
Ms. Sorg?
Yes.
Ms. Fitzgibbon?
Yes.
Ms. Fergus?
Yes.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Carried.
And that motion carries. And I would entertain a motion for revisions to policy 711, promotion of students.
I make a motion to approve policy 711, promotion of students.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion to approve policy 711 has been made. Is there any discussion?
All the errors that I found, they're all great.
That is.
They're all good.
Bev
All
was
of them.
looking over at us, hoping that would be the case. So, if there is no more discussion, then we are ready to vote on this policy as well. And again, Bev, could you do this by roll call?
Ms. Fitzgibbon?
Yes.
Mr. Dirks?
Yes.
Ms. Tarpinian?
Yes.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Ms. Sorg?
Yes.
Mr. Schumacher?
Yes.
Ms. Grassi?
Yes.
And Ms. Fergus?
Yes.
Great, thank you very much. So we have some, I don't know if there's any future board agenda items that we needed to discuss, but please note on the schedule that we have, this is a little bit mixed up. Our next meeting is at the regular, at the administration building on April 18th. We have a board reorganization meeting on April 25th, and if there are any other items to discuss that need to be dealt with, they will be at that time. We also have an upcoming policy committee meeting on April 11th, and then our last building tour will be May 2nd at the high school. Great, so seeing, look to 7, Liz, Menzer, no time.
It's a voting day tomorrow. Everyone please remember.
Yeah.
Vote
Yes.
early
Remember
and
to
vote often.
Seeing no more regular business for the Board of Education, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.